is proudly brought to you by Discovery Invest.
Well, the fall in commodity prices leading to thousands of jobs being shed, and it's enunciated the need to diversify and support South Africa's local economy. The Buy Back South Africa campaign aims to get South Africans to buy more local products and create jobs in the process. Leslie Sedibe is the Chief Evangelist, or the Chief Evangelist Officer, the CEO of Proudly South African. He joins us on this episode of The Moneymakers to explain why you and I need to be buying more South African and a little less not South African. Every time you meet Leslie Sedibe in the shops, you should say to him, let me see the inside of your jacket. Show me the Proudly South African label, because you will do it. Leslie Sedibe.
Well, I think obviously, leadership is about what you do. People listen to your actions more than what you say. This campaign, the Buy Back South Africa, it really is an industry's response as a country. How do we respond to the current challenges that we face? President Zuma spoke about the trifecta of poverty, unemployment, and growing inequalities. And one of the ways that we believe very strongly as an organization that we can address, at least in the short term, perhaps even medium to long, the issues around unemployment, is to understand that you need to look at what's happening in the economy. What's happening in the economy is that people are losing jobs. So we have a lot of these challenges. And in order to address those challenges, we believe that we need to reindustrialize our economy. We have lost serious jobs. And the reason we are losing some of those jobs is purely because we are net consumers of imported products.
We most certainly are. And there's a good reason for it as well. They're cheap, they're well made, and they're easy to get.
Well, not entirely. They are cheap, yes, but you have to compare apples with apples. When you talk cheap cheap in terms of price. What about quality? Because you also need to, for something could come in cheaper, it doesn't necessarily mean that the quality is the same if you had to compare it with a local price. Let me give you an example. Mm-hmm. You have a company like PG Glass that makes about 13 kilometers of windscreen every day. People in that sector, you and I drive cars that have windscreens. Question is, where do you buy your windscreen? Where do I buy my windscreen? Because if my windscreen is made from some of these countries, some of our trading partners, the quality is not the same as a PG Glass safety that adheres to strict safety standards. So
okay, let's go back to square one then and say SABS should be an absolutely pivotal part of this process. I've dealt with SABS, sweet people. I'm not a big believer in the quality assurance of SABS, perhaps as I might have been 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think it probably is a 15-year-old experience that you have. I think SABS has very robust systems. I think one of the challenges that
we can trust SABS?
We can trust SABS. In fact, we're in the process of entering into a cooperation and teaming agreement as Proudly South African with SABS in terms of the measurements of local content. Remember that to measure local content, it's not the same for different sectors. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So we have this sector approach that we're in discussions with the SABS in terms of how, and I think you should invite the CEO of SABS, and I think you'll find her very engaging, very intelligent, understand what needs to happen in the economy. So the partnership with SABS is quite key. When you look at the issues of some of the challenges that you have in the industry, it really is people are not complying. Now, the question that one needs to ask...
Complying with what?
Well, people are not complying with standards.
Okay.
And part of the problem is the self-declaration method, where people are saying, well, we will declare on, come on, if I want to cook the books, last week I addressed a conference of school principals, and I made the point that doctors bury their mistakes, lawyers have their mistakes behind bars, and teachers live with their mistakes. You know what accountants do whenever there's an accounting error. So the key thing that needs to happen here is that everybody needs to understand the impact of their decision on the overall economy.
Do we as South Africans, broadly speaking, not rate ourselves enough to want to buy South African? We're not sufficiently proudly South African, perhaps, to support South Africa?
Well, I think, firstly, this campaign was more about brand visibility. Yeah. Are you proudly South African? At the emotive level, most South Africans will say, yes, I am proud to be a South African. At the rational level, understand that times are tough. Times are tough for a lot of people. Many people have lost jobs, and some of them have even given up the hope of finding a job. And so if there's an opportunity to buy something, the first key determinant is price.
You know what I haven't seen for a long time is your proudly South African stickers. Whatever happened to those?
No, they're still there. They're still there. And
where are you hiding them?
We're not hiding them.
But the thing is, with those, there was a strong surge in this campaign 7 or 8 years ago. The proudly South African sticker was everywhere. It was a highly visible campaign. It's gone off the boil.
And it's about, it's a question of the value proposition. I was talking earlier about how you need to balance and achieve an equilibrium between the emotive and the rational. At a rational level, people will ask you, what's in it for me? And the case that we make out is, one, South African goods are actually quality goods. That perception that South African goods were inferior, I think it's slowly dissipated. People are beginning to see. Secondly, these cheap goods, South Africans post-94 were spoiled for choice. We've got products coming in from other countries. Are they cheap goods? Yes, they are, but not quality is not guaranteed in all respects. My view is that a country like China, for example, has 2 production lines. One is for quality goods and the other one is for cheap goods. And most of the goods that end up on countries, if we talk about developing and developed economies, a developing economy such as ours finds itself having to consume a lot of these products that are highly incentivized, and some of them are cheap. In fact, what we are against as proud South African.
Have you been to China Mall?
I have.
It's enticing. And who's shopping in China Mall? The vast majority of South Africans who are scraping by, who can buy things at China Mall that look okay, that have a limited period of functionality, but they get their retail fix because they can afford it.
Precisely.
Isn't proudly South African for an elite? Buying South Africa for an elite?
No, it's not for an elite. We think that what the challenge that our manufacturers face at the moment is that they compete with products that come from other countries where those products are highly incentivized. And you see that in agriculture, you see that in various sectors. You had this fight about the poultry industry. You saw the fuss that the Americans kicked up. That is the challenge that ultimately South African products find themselves having to compete with. Now, what has happened? What has happened is that some industries have had to close. Mines are closing. Various shops are closing. Some businesses really have gone bust purely because the pressure is so much that it is going. There will have to come a time where we'll have to use an instrument to regulate some of the pricing models, particularly in issues like tariffs.
If we start regulating price, we start putting protections in on price, we lose the desire for competitiveness. One of the criticisms of South Africa is that we're insufficiently competitive, that we're a high-cost producer of many products and services, and we need to get that side of the economy, the competitiveness side, the productivity side of the economy sorted out in parallel with this idea of buying proudly South African. Because if suddenly buying proudly South African, you're forcing me to do it and it's going to cost me 20% more, I'm going to find another way of doing it.
And we will completely lose. Which is why one of the, when we look at the acrostic, we use the acrostic PRIDE as proudly South African. P stands for patriotism, productivity, and partnership. I, it's about reindustrialization. Sorry, R, it's about reindustrialization. I, it's about innovation and competitiveness. There is absolutely no way that as a country we would be able to address the challenges that we face unless we become competitive. Now, competitiveness is not only about price. Competitiveness also is about the manner in which we do business. If you know that if you come to my restaurant, you're going to get the greatest service and you'll walk out of there a happy customer, chances are that even if you may be forced to pay a premium, you will still come to my shop. The issue here is this, that South Africans need to understand that the money that we spend on imported goods, the moment that money leaves the country, South Africa is poorer. If you take the example of pharmaceuticals, I believe that the Department of Health has an industrial, at the heart of what they need to do, besides addressing the health challenge, they have a responsibility towards contributing towards industrial policy. And that has a lot to do with saying that in as much as you may be paying 15 cents more on a particular tablet, in the long term, you will not have to pay 35 cents more on social grants. We need to find a way that we develop the capacity of the state, have a capable developing state, and we move away from relying on products that come from other countries that turn our own country into a warehouse of imported goods.
No, completely. And one looks at, for example, I mean, how are you funded? Are you funded through private sector or some state funding?
Both.
Okay, so you got some state funding. You must have been spitting mad when you read about PRASA, not only importing locomotives, which with a bit of effort could have been, and some planning could have been manufactured in South Africa, but locomotives that we weren't even according to South African specifications.
Well, I mean, and those are the issues that we need to address. When we talk about competitiveness...
How supportive have we got, how supportive is the state in this process? Because
we
you need that buy-in.
We do have the support of the state. Let me tell you what the DTI has done. The DTI has, for the very first time, through the regulations, Section 9.3 of the regulations to the Preferential Procurement Framework Act, introduced an instrument of designation of sectors. I'll tell you where the problem is. There's an implementation deficit. That is our challenge. Yeah. There's an implementation deficit in the country, and there's a trust deficit in the country. We don't trust each other as South Africans. And part of the challenge that we face is how do we get the likes of PRASA to understand that rolling stock is actually part of the designation as far back as the 7th of December 2011. Are we happy about it? No, we're not. No, we're not. And we do believe that it's unfortunate that PRASA would go to Spain to go and spend 600 million rands of South African tax money when that money could have been spent to build capacity in our own country to make sure that these trains are made in our country. But part of the challenge is we need to go back to the basics. We need to address our education. We need engineers, not enough lawyers. We need enough people in the economy. We need those artisans. We need those technicians. Various levels of skills are needed in the economy to make sure that the South African economy works.
From your lips, absolutely. Leslie Sedibe, the Chief Executive of Proudly South Africa. You'll find few more so than Leslie Sedibe. There'll be more money makers tomorrow, and hopefully money makers keeping a little bit of that money in South Africa. Thank you for watching. Till next time, good night and goodbye.